You Won't Fuck It Up was the title came from an old boss of mine where he said to me when I was a young bloke in the financial planning firm, property's easy, Dom. You just have to not fuck it up. And what he meant by that is just do the simple things well and then give the property enough space to grow.
Welcome to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, the leading weekly show to help you unlock your full self, health and wealth potential. I'm your host, Bushy Martin, and each week I go deep with the best investors, experts, leaders and founders to find out what it takes to break free from the grind, discover freedom and live by design. Subscribe now and join me and get invested in the life you really want. Let's get started. Hi, freedom fighters. Are you thinking of investing in property or contemplating securing another property? How long have you been thinking about it? What's holding you back? Is it the constant stream of negative noise dressed up as news? Or perhaps you've capped out on your buying capacity or equity with your current bank and you don't think you've got the horsepower left to add to your portfolio. Is it the fact that everyone calls themselves an expert in real estate and so you just don't know who to trust? Now, I've certainly suffered from this when I started out. So I tried to reinvent the property wheel by doing it all myself. And all I ended up doing was making a lot of very expensive mistakes that I didn't even know that I was making. I just didn't know what I didn't know. The reality is that there's always a good excuse why now is never the right time to secure property, as we retreat within our comfort zones and rely on one excuse or another to justify our lack of action. If we continue to do what we've always done or not done, we'll continue to get what we've always got, which is more of the same old, same old. The chances are that what's really holding you back is the person that's staring back at you in the mirror. And yes, I'm talking about you. I've heard it said that many of us only do something when the pain of not doing it becomes greater than the pain and pleasure of taking that long-awaited action. So let's check in. How much are you enjoying your life right now? Do you have much free time and money on your hands? Are you doing all the things that you really enjoy doing and have always wanted to do? How much longer do you want to work to continue slaving over work that you don't enjoy for people you don't even like or respect to earn money that you've already spent before you've even seen it? How much longer do you want to feel constantly hurried, hassled and harried as you race from one thing to the next just to get by, and you never feel like you've got the time, space or energy to do the things that you enjoy and are really important to you? So when are you going to make the break? What's it going to take to wake you up and shake you up to do something different and take the investment action that deep down you know you've always needed to take? If not now, when? And if not you, then who? Or perhaps you're all dressed up and ready to roll, but you've been waiting months or even years trying to find that perfect property. But something always seems to fall short. The property's never quite right. As a closet perfectionist, I know how you feel. We have this inbuilt tendency to try and overcomplicate things by pushing too hard to find that unicorn property that's going to outperform the market and answer all of our dreams. But our expectations are never quite met, and we end up frustrated, forever dissatisfied, and never quite getting started. And it's the start that stops most people. The reality is that your first property won't tick all the boxes. In fact, your second, third and fourth are not likely to either. It's important to recognise from the get-go that the properties you secure are never going to be perfect. There will always be some element of compromise. But if you employ Pareto's 80-20 rule and you secure a property, then time, the tenant and the tax office will do most of the heavy lifting for you. Remember, it's never about when, it's always about what and where. If you keep holding out for that perfect property, you're just going to end up sitting on the sidelines and doing nothing. And time in the market is a key ingredient for your success. Overanalyzing everything becomes its own problem because it can cause you decision fatigue. It can make you confused and result in you compromising and end up choosing a property just for the sake of it because you're over it. Now, many selling agents know this, and it's one of the reasons why one of the first questions they always ask you is, how long have you been looking for your property? So let me remind you of an old maxim that today's guest has perfectly captured in the title to his newly released book. If you embrace some fundamental property principles, you keep it simple and align with your goals, your capacity, the time you have available, and your sleep at night risk profile, then investing in property can be easy. And here's the punchline: you won't F it up. I'm being polite there, Dom. Now, this just happens to be the title of our guest Domenic Nesci's book, which we're going to unpack for you today. As you're about to hear, Domenic has personally built a multi-million-dollar property portfolio following his childhood passion for property that resulted in him starting as an agent at the tender age of 17 and purchasing his first property when he was 22, and then becoming the director of a real estate investment company when he was just 23. He went on to work for one of Australia's top property development companies and has spent a stint as a financial planner before co-founding his national real estate investment company, Wealthi. He specialised in helping Latin Americans to invest in the Australian property market. Over his career, Domenic has helped hundreds of clients invest in over $1 billion in commercial and residential property right across the country. And Domenic shares my passion of helping you make smart decisions about real estate and taking the right actions to help you secure and potentially build a property portfolio that's going to set you free financially. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking the gems in his great new book. So welcome, and let's get invested, Domenic.
It's good to be on the show, Bushy. A really, really good introduction. There's so many little bits of gold in what you've just said there, and in itself, it's enough for people to listen to.
Well, I've got to say, Domenic, all of that was inspired by reading your book, mate. There's a lot in there that I've paraphrased and taken from the gold that you've actually spelled out in the book. But Dom, before we sort of get into that, I'd love for you to share, for those who don't know you, what you do differently, and as importantly, why do you do what you do?
What do I do differently? I feel that a lot of people would say this, but I genuinely care. I give a fuck. Sorry for swearing. And I recognize that everybody is at a different point in their life, and not all strategies suit everybody. And what I point to in the book and what I talk about very often is that everything works, but for different people. And what I mean by that is, everyone's going to come at you and say, hey, my strategy is best, or you've got to do duplexes, or you've got to buy off the plan, or you've got to buy a renovator's delight. And they all work, and they all come with their own levels of pain or profit. So what I do differently is I agree, or I say yes, that, hey, these strategies all work, but just not for everybody. And not everybody equally. And I recognize that everybody out there is their own individual. They have their own life path, and they have a different set of priorities. Some of us prioritize profit above all else and are happy to undergo any amount of pain in order to get that profit. But some of us really value picking up the kids at 3 o'clock. They really value watching the sunset, taking a holiday, and maybe would call themselves a lazy investor. And for you, that's okay. Maybe you don't need to go and become a developer tomorrow because you really enjoy coding or cutting hair or whatever it is your life passion. So what I do differently is I take the time to listen to the individual's life goals, what amount of pain and stress they're happy to undertake. And I'm very happy to allow a person to go on their path, because not all clients, not all services need to be met by the one person, and everyone has their own life journey. So I think, sitting and listening to the people that I work with is one thing that I really pride myself on. I'm not trying to shoehorn everyone into what I like to do. It's what I like to do suits me and some other people, but what you like to do is going to suit other services and other businesses.
Love it. Love it. I totally embrace your philosophy on that, Dom. For myself, there's no one silver bullet must-do strategy that works in property. It's as you say, everyone's different. They have different goals, expectations, capacity, time available. There's a whole different options than you can pursue. It's a matter of at least embracing and exposing yourself to all of those, and then choosing one that feels right and works right. So very refreshing to hear you say that, Dom, because as you've already said, there are a lot of players in the property space who would like to have you believe they've got the one magic solution, when we all know that a whole different avenues are going to get you there. It's just a matter of what works for you. So beautifully said, mate. I'd love to now sort of kick straight into a bit of a run through, a bit of a Reader's Digest, really, of your own personal journey so far. Sort of focusing on what you've invested your time, energy, and money in over the years, and why, and how this has led you to where you are today. And we'll talk more in general terms first, and then we'll drill down into your own personal property journey a little bit later on.
Sure, sounds good. So my journey started really, really young. So I've always been a massive property advocate. I've always loved real estate. I grew up around the dinner table listening to stories of uncles, friends, family saying, I coulda, shoulda, woulda. You know, my dad told me a story when he was younger. Oh, I could have bought that house across the road from your grandmother's, or my nonna. But I didn't. I decided to use that deposit to buy a car, and that broke my heart. And then I heard all these different recurring stories of people that should have bought real estate at a price, 50,000, 100,000, now it's 2 million, 3 million, whatever it is. And that was extremely discouraging for me. It really just felt frustrating. So as a kid, I didn't have any money, but what I did have was a lot of time and a lot of ambition. And I just set about reading every book that I possibly could. You know, The Richest Man in Babylon, you know, Robert Kiyosaki, you know, I think Steve McKnight's 0 to 360 properties or something, or 1 million properties. And so I spent all my time reading all of these books. And then as soon as I possibly could, I got a job in real estate. And working in real estate was a really good way for me to get a sense of what successful people were doing, who was buying real estate, what made for a good investment, what was a terrible investment. You know, I was the gopher. So I'd work with the property managers, I'd work with the sales guys, I'd work with the admin team, the auctioneer, everyone in the business, and got to see a little bit of everything. After that, I spent some time working in a financial planning firm. And
I'm going to jump straight in there because it's almost an unusual path in some ways, because you've clearly got a passion for property. The financial planning industry generally is almost anti-property because they're not licensed to be able to talk about it. So I'd be interested in why you chose to go down the financial planning course at that point in time.
Well, I didn't know that there was real estate agents were typically frowned upon or looked at as, you know, basically car salesmen, untrustworthy. And in my family and people around me, it was kind of you're a bit of a loser. You left school at year 10 to become a real estate agent. And I didn't want to be pegged in inverted commas as a loser. And I went and did a business degree. So I got a finance degree, and I kind of got pushed into becoming a stockbroker or a finance analyst or something like that. And then I fell into financial planning because I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that. I thought financial planning meant learning about all the different investment classes and then giving people advice on how to buy investments. I later found out that it's basically rolling over from one superannuation to another and then getting people to get insurance. That's how you make money. Funds under management and insurance. And funds under management isn't necessarily allocating savings or creating a savings plan to then go buy property or shares, or it was not what I thought it was.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a professional career to help empower people to buy real estate in a more sophisticated way, but it wasn't that. What I did notice, and I was very lucky, I landed in a firm that was open to real estate, which is very non-traditional. Yeah. And during the GFC, the world fell apart, and there was an opportunity for me to use my property license to then create a real estate firm separate from the financial planning practice, but then start to do research across Australia to see what markets would be best for clients that eventually saved enough to buy a house. So we started to marry the firms together, and that's when I became the director of a real estate firm. So I started as a financial planner, stopped financial planning, created a real estate firm, and I'd help all the financial planners invest their clients' money into different pieces of real estate around Australia.
Right.
That was a tremendous amount of responsibility for a 23-year-old man. So I learned very quickly about real estate, traveled around Australia, and I didn't feel it would be authentic for me to go and tell people about real estate unless I owned real estate, especially as a young man. So very quickly, I bought my own piece of real estate, but I was very lucky because I had an internal conveyancing team or solicitor, so I could lean on him to do the contract reviews. And he would use me to then as a bit of overflow. So I'd read contracts to clients all the time. We had our own internal mortgage broking business. So I learned very quickly about debt to income ratio, serviceability, overexposure, principal and interest versus interest only, offset accounts. So it was a very well-rounded education by the age of 23. I went and bought my own property and made heaps of mistakes. As you said, even with all the best advice, I made a ton of different mistakes with that property. I bought a south-facing 2-bedroom apartment that didn't have a balcony, and the car spot was not on title. It was a exclusive use. So there was a hell of a lot of things that I did wrong, but that property grew $100,000 in 2 or 3 years, and it gave me the equity that I need to continue investing. So it taught me a lot about real estate. It taught me that you can fuck up 100 things, but you only need one thing to happen. And that piece of real estate just needs to grow. And once it does grow, you can use the equity to keep on going. And it also taught me that, as you said, property doesn't need to do everything. Once you've got that little bit that you have, you can kind of move on from it. If it's not perfect, you can sell that piece of real estate. You're not married to it. It's like a business. It needs to be profitable. It needs to deliver results. And if it doesn't, see you later. You're not married to the thing. I after a time working as a financial planner, as a real estate consultant, running that business, I was very successful for a young man. I was 25. I bought, I think, 3 pieces of real estate by that time. And I decided to see what else was going on in the world. I packed up shop, sold a bunch of stuff. Moved to New York, bartended for about a year and saw the United States, and I lived in Manhattan. Nice. And that was an eye-opening experience for me because Australia's this big. It's a little thing. And traveling gives you a broader perspective of what the world's made up of. Yep. And it gives you a better perspective on the values you have back at home. You think Australia is amazing. We've got clean air, great healthcare, excellent education system. Whether you're a liberal, Labor, Green, whatever, we've got a strong stable political system. Yep. Our tax laws are stable. We probably get overtaxed, but that's another thing. But we spend all our money relatively well. We spend a lot of money in infrastructure. Every time you come into Sydney or Melbourne, there's something new that's happening. It's an invigorating country. It's young. And coming back from New York, I just thought Australia's cheap. Everyone's fighting over one little square patch, but there's so much land. There's so much opportunity. It's the golden country. And it was a really, really good eye-opening experience for me. Part of my investment journey, and I probably did things a little differently to everyone else, is I bought a lot of off-the-plan property.
Yep. Let's go straight in there because you're right. There's you and I are probably both rarities in the space because there's a lot of industry commentators and a lot of property professionals who really poo-poo both new build and off-the-plan exercises. I used to be an architect, Dom, so I'm very comfortable with the whole building scene and can really see the merits of it, particularly from the depreciation benefits and tax savings and the stamp duty savings and everything else that flows out of it. But there's a lot of people who are really hell-bent on scaring the hell out of people in that space. So what the two questions I'd like to drill into right there is, one, firstly, clearly you were you got into property pretty young. What gave you the courage to take that leap and take some action so early? Because as I said in the introduction, it's the start that generally stops most people. Were there any fears that you had before you got involved? And then in conjunction with that, clearly, why did the off-the-plan space attract you?
I think it was a function of a bit of my personality. My personality is pretty action orientated. I live in a constant state of I'm missing out, which is not a good thing. The fear of missing out is deep within my soul. I always feel like I could be doing more. And it's a good thing because it gets you cracking when you're always out doing stuff. You're running through the forest. You're constantly chasing the next mountain, the scale. But it also can be a bad thing where sometimes you run off in the wrong direction and it causes you all sorts of pain and anguish. But we can cover those stories later. Yeah. To answer your specific question, I wanted to get into real estate quickly because I felt like I was missing out. And even at 22, I felt like I was delayed. I wanted to get it earlier. Yeah. And then I stepped towards brand new property because of my financial planning background and also because of what I was trying to achieve in my career. The financial planning background and having an internal accounting firm, it taught me a lot about depreciation and then the cost to hold a property after tax.
Yep.
And lodging your first tax return on a brand new property and getting $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 back was a very rewarding experience. Yep. And it was a bit more of a passive play. I was working very hard, long hours, and I didn't see myself having the capacity to buy something old, do a massive renovation and all that stuff. I did that with my first property. I bought an old property, renovated it, made money and all that kind of stuff. Yep. But then for the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth property, they were all off the plan.
Yep.
And I had built a good system where I started identifying high growth markets that were doing all the heavy lifting for me.
Yep.
So I could focus more of my attention on building my career, building my business, traveling, having fun. And I'm a bit of a lazy investor in the early start of my career. So basically the first decade, I didn't do a huge amount of heavy lifting outside of the research up front, identifying markets that were going to grow. And off the plan properties, kind of like real estate futures. Yeah. You put a small deposit, allow the market to do the growth, and then you claim your growth at the end. So just a quick analogy there. The second property I purchased was, again, ideally not the best investment. I didn't have the best advice around me, but I bought a 1-bed, 1-bath, no car property in Newcastle. It was 200 and something thousand, like high 200s or something.
Yep.
And about a year and a half later, it was worth just over 400,000. So I made $100K worth of equity in about 24 months.
Yep.
Part of the reason why I bought that investment is it was a short walk to the beach. So location was critical. I could see that the heavy rail line was being ripped up. They're putting in a light rail. So I could see the infrastructure spending was there. And also it was a tight part of the market where I could negotiate with a developer. And I gave him about $5,000, I believe, as my original deposit. So I didn't have a lot of savings. And I basically bought a property or had control over the property with $5K. So it was a small deposit for control over a $300,000 asset that later grew to be over $400,000. So $100,000 return on $5,000.
Can't sneeze at that.
So it was good. So it was, for all intensive purposes, a shitty investment because it's a 1-bed, 1-bath, no car. But it did everything that I needed to do. And for a 20-something-year-old man making $100,000 or $5,000, I was like, fantastic. And then that property enabled me to then sell it, take the cash out. I bought a 2-bedroom, which was what I should have done in the first instance. Push it a little harder, not be so fear-riddled because everyone was saying, hey, you're a young man, don't get this debt, don't overexpose yourself. I went and bought a bigger asset. So the lesson there was, whilst you're young, your income's growing, back yourself into buying the best thing that you can buy when you can buy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bushy, I kind of chat a little bit. Did I answer your questions about?
Yeah, no, you have. That's really good. Let's continue down that pathway, and I'd like you to take us through the good, bad, and ugly of your own journey. You've shared the first couple of properties with us. Take us on the rest of that journey, and I want to sort of focus on what are some of the challenges that you came across, what worked and what didn't, and what have been the key learnings that you've taken out of your own investment journey today.
Let me tell you a mistake that I haven't told many people. It's a bit embarrassing for me, to be honest with you. I've wasted some money. I wasted a lot of money. And I've wasted money trying different things and investing in having a crack. I had a crack at being a developer early, which was, good. It's good on me for having a go, but God, I suffered by doing all the wrong things. Identified a great market. I wanted to invest in it was St. Mary's, not close to Penrith. Knew I could see there was going to be a new rail line going in. There was going to be the metro, all sorts of stuff. And what I was trying to do was a joint venture with a landowner where effectively they'd tip in the land and then I would run the development application process. I had my own architect, I had a solicitor, I had the team around me. And I engaged a solicitor, one of the big firms, because I thought that's what you had to do to then try and draft up this JV agreement and all this type of stuff. Long story short, I ended up spending about $10,000 in legal fees trying to get the right structure before I had actually agreed on the right price with the vendor.
Right.
So long story short is the vendor didn't come around to wanting to do a deal with me. I spent all this money on trying to learn how to do a JV with a vendor and essentially squandered thousands, $10,000 in legal fees, hundreds, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 hours with architects doing concept designs and all this kind of stuff. So that was me trying to do a leap into doing my first development.
Yep.
Which was probably the wrong way to do it. I have since bought development sites and, done things the correct way. But again, that whole action-orientated mentality, dive in head first and figure it out on the way, it's good in many instances, but it can also get you burnt, and be prepared to lose a couple of dollars along the way. Now, the reason why I've noticed that some of these mistakes, or I make these mistakes, is because I'll be trying to do too many things at once.
Yeah.
I've got multiple businesses. I have Wealthi. I have a commercial construction company. I've invested in a couple of finance firms, and I have an active play in a lot of these different companies. And then I've noticed that tied in with, I have now a 16-month-old baby, so raising a young child, and then trying to renovate my own home and run a DA on my own house. So trying to juggle all these different things, it can become quite burdensome. And if you do too many things at once, something's got to give. And that's when you start to make mistakes. Maybe you're running a DA that you don't need to run, or maybe you're overcapitalizing on a property that the market won't take the product that you're trying to deliver. So that's another mistake that I made in my book. Sorry,
go on. No, go on. I was just going to say, with everything you've just described, I'm not seeing much sleep time in there, Dom. So and that will have its own fun and games eventually. So I'd take my hat off to you to trying to spin all of those plates at the same time, mate.
Thanks. I appreciate the pat on the back there. Well, another mistake that I've made recently is people make the mistake of treating property like it's a stock, or going into a property purchase and wanting to turn it around and get a specific result within a time frame. You only really do that if you're a developer, and being a developer is fraught with risk. I talk about this in my profit paying principles. It's the most profitable. It is by far the most painful. And if you're going in to buy an investment, you set your strategy, it costs a lot of money to change course.
Yep.
So I had bought my property in Nelson Bay. I'm living in it now, but I originally bought it as a holiday home. I wanted to buy it, small renovation, leave it, let the market do its thing, do holiday listings, and then just collect the cash from it.
Yep.
Then COVID hit. My fiance got pregnant. We thought we'd move into the thing, and then we started treating it like a house. Then we started spending more money on the investment. Bank valuation was great, like $1 million. So things are great. Then we ran a DA. Hey, why don't we make this house bigger? And why don't we live in Nelson Bay for longer? Now we're out of COVID and living in Nelson Bay is beautiful, but all my businesses are in Sydney and Sydney's pulling me back.
Yeah.
Since now bought a house in Sydney. So this house is great, but I don't really want to have it here anymore. Interest rates are flying. We've had 13 consecutive rate rises. And then it's just going to cost a lot for me to now keep this property and my Sydney home. So now I'm looking at selling the Nelson Bay house, but I'm not going to make the profit that I had anticipated because it was supposed to be a sit, long hold, cash flow strategy.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'm selling it faster than I wanted to means that I'm not going to make the profit that I had anticipated. And it puts, again, a lot of burden on your investment strategy. So doing too many things at once, changing strategies midway through, all expensive things to be doing. I feel like this is a therapy session for me.
I really appreciate you being open and sharing that, mate, because that's the sort of stuff that most people don't get to hear. They get to hear all the gloss and the shiny result stuff. But I really appreciate you being quite open about that, because that's the year that people really need to get their head around. Just while we're talking about changing strategy, what was your investment strategy when you first started out, and how has it evolved over time as your knowledge and comfort level and whatnot has increased? How has it changed and why? Can you sort of give us a run through what was in your head and what's now in your head as you've continued down that pathway?
My initial investment strategy was to be quite passive, buy, hold good quality investments, high growth markets where the income covered most of the debt, and then certainly the tax return would cover whatever gap was left between the rent and then my mortgage.
Yep.
At a point, you then realize after you get to so many properties, you get capped out from your servicing. And regardless of what you read in the newspaper, Mr. 65K and buying 15 properties, that's not the truth.
No.
The banks have debt to income ratios where you basically can't borrow any more money. And then once you do, then you have to go to non-bank lenders, and then they charge you all sorts of exorbitant fees. And then if you're going to go down that route, then you might have to buy inside of a trust. And then you get into all sorts of complicated structures for different types of investments.
Yep.
So basically at a point, my investment philosophy has matured, where I bought a whole bunch of passive investments. They did really well, made millions off that. But then you kind of cap out, and then the itch is still there to do more. So that's when at that point, my investment philosophy or strategy started to mature in two ways. One, I finally bought the dream house that I wanted to buy.
Yep.
So I sold a bunch of property to buy my own home, and it doesn't have a huge amount of debt. I'm in the area. I'm settling on it this Friday. Yep. So moving into my home that I really want to live in. Fantastic. That's an emotional strategy. There are other benefits of buying your own home. You don't pay any CGT on your home that you flip. So that's a separate thing.
Totally.
But now my interest is into going bigger investments that I can then develop more to become more of a developer strategy. I mean, I've been doing this more than a decade. I work with developers. I have my own team of architects, solicitors. So the stuff that I wanted to do when I was young and ambitious, I can now do a lot better because I have a team around me, and You can't see it through the camera, but I have a few more grey hairs.
Can't
So
see them, mate. You hide them well.
yeah, so the strategy has matured, and it's just because I've been capped out. You know, you can only buy so many properties in a passive nature, and that's done really well. But what I've learned is whenever you set a goal for yourself, be careful because you'll hit it. And then once you've hit it, the goal will grow.
Yeah.
You know?
Spot on. What I like about what you've shared with us there is that, and this is that particularly a lot of first-time investors don't think enough about, I think, is that you need to be matching what you invest in with the time you've got available to manage that process, but also the knowledge you have around that particular asset class. And what I like about what you're hearing now, what you've shared with us, is that you started off with a passive approach because you're clearly very busy. So, you know, it's a matter of recognizing that I don't have much time. So a more longer term passive exercise is going to be easier to manage. But as your knowledge has increased and your network has increased, so you've got the right players around you that can then open you up to other opportunities that potentially have higher rewards. Yes, they have high risk, but you've got risk mitigation in place because you've got that extra layer of knowledge and independent professionalism supporting your team approach to that exercise. Then you're better placed to be able to optimize the outcome of those opportunities as you've grown on the journey. And I did, you know, as you said before, you jumped in early into the off the plan exercise. I was no different, mate. My first exercise when I think I was 22 or 3 was a 1-into-4 redevelopment, and it was a disaster. Quite honestly, we misread everything because I was an architect, and you know, as an architect, you think you know better when actually all you know is enough to be dangerous. To be quite honest. So I think that's a really good sharing, and something that I would love anyone listening to this to take away is match what you're investing in with where you're at in terms of knowledge and the time that you've got available. Yes, the capacity stuff's there, but time is a key ingredient because if you don't have time and you take on a property development that needs a lot of grunt, then that's when you're going to get yourself into trouble. So I love you sharing that. Now, you've also touched on a couple of things already that you may have answered this question, but if you reflect back on your own personal investment journey so far, Dom, what's been your best and your worst investment, and what have you learned from both of those?
What's my best and worst investments?
In
real estate, specifically?
Yeah, in property. Yep.
One of the best was actually a commercial investment.
Yep.
Again, off the plan. I bought that I could see through Newcastle's town planning. A good learning here is once you get into a market, you do a lot of research. It's okay to double or triple down in a market if you know it well and you've got the wherewithal and the longevity in that market. Because cities take decades to mature. So because you've got one property in Sydney doesn't mean you capped out. You know, diversification is great, but you can buy 4 or 5 properties in Sydney and still be diversified. Same thing with Newcastle, Melbourne, some of the bigger major metros, right?
Yeah.
So I was doing a lot of work in Newcastle, and I identified that the council and state planning tell you what they plan on doing over the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years.
Yep.
And they generally stick to it, especially once the budget's been allocated and they start spending the money.
Yeah.
So I identified that the Newcastle city had earmarked for a brand new train station, which was going to be their central train station. And at that point, I was working on a development, and the ground floor, we're doing shop top residential. On the ground floor is going to be your commercial properties, and at the top was going to be your residential. Right. And I could see that this whole area in Wickham was going to go from light industrial to a residential, and the government wanted there to be thousands of people in the area. Now, a natural consequence of thousands of people is there's an economic flow-on effect. Yep. It goes from being 100 people walking around an area to 5,000 people walk around an area. Now there's an opportunity for retail and commercial expansion because all these people want to buy milk, they want haircuts, they want T-shirts, they want coffees, and they want drinks.
Yeah.
food, all that type of stuff.
Yep.
I could see that over time, this area is going to become more of a mature market. Thousands of people are going to go there. So I decided to take a punt on buying a commercial property off the plan. And I bought this commercial property. It's about 200 square meters for 330,000 or something like that.
Wow.
And yeah, but it was quite expensive at that time because it was a shitty area. There was chickens running around the area. There was no train station. There was an abandoned bus. And, I was crazy for buying it because there was no market for a commercial property there. But looking into the future, I could see there would be. At completion, the property was then worth about 650K. So it's 2 years. I put a 10% deposit. It was $30,000. At completion, it was worth 650. So 2 years, it was about 300K uplift. So that was a really good little quick turnaround. And the great thing about that commercial property is that I was getting then when I first leased it out, it was renting out for about $42,000 a year. So it was a really good rental return on the original purchase.
Yeah.
The uplift meant I could pull a whole bunch of equity out, and then I could take that cash and then reinvest it in something else.
Yeah,
that was a really good investment.
Yeah, that's a cracker. And what I again picking the eyes out of what you've just said there for those that are listening in. A big believer that you've got to put on your future glasses or a telescope and look at how an area is going to look in 10 years' time based on the committed infrastructure that's going into an area, the industry that's going to follow in behind that, and then the strong and growing incomes that are going to support the ability to continue paying more for property. So I call it the 3 I's of growth. There's a lot more to it, and we'll talk more about some of the fundamental drivers when we start talking about your book. But you've just evidenced exactly that, mate. You've looked at the committed infrastructure that's going to be there. So rather than look at an area as it is today, and then be put off by what you're seeing today, you'd really need to put on your virtual future glasses and have a look at exactly what's going to happen in that area and then get ahead of that game. And if you're in it long enough, then you're going to get the results, which clearly you have. So appreciate you sharing that. What about on the flip side? You've talked about a couple of bad ones, but have you already shared the worst investment, or is there anything else in there that you'd be happy to share with us?
The worst investment. Yeah, probably the worst investment was having a crack at sites I didn't get to buy. They were the worst investments.
Yeah.
Wasting money on, architects' plans, or paying money on fees for potential sites that I didn't buy. That's the embarrassing stuff that I'm kick myself for. Hard lessons learned, spending thousands of dollars, just 10 grand gone, 15K gone on effectively shit. So it's
except that, but all you've done is paid for your education, Dom, because the learnings you've taken out of that, and while you might not get an immediate result, your ongoing opportunities you're looking at, you've already got that knowledge in your head. So your due diligence and your feasibilities over the properties you're looking at are going to be far more advanced as a consequence of what you did with those ones that didn't quite come off. So while you might feel bad about it, I think it's all, risk to the mill as far as that goes in terms of your ongoing development in the property area. So, mate, really appreciate you doing that. I want to jump into the future for a minute now and get you to talk to us about, what does fulfillment, freedom, and financial independence mean to you? What's your definition?
Fulfillment, freedom, and financial independence. Well, there's been different stages of my life where I have been quite literally financially free and didn't need to work and was receiving an income. But at each junction, your ambitions grow. You want bigger things, your family grows, your household expenses grow, and then suddenly you're not financially free. You can be one of those FIRE people where you basically have an income and you live in a caravan. That's great for some people.
Yeah.
I have much larger aspirations, which drives my fiance insane sometimes. But for me, I've got a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I really enjoy business as much as I love real estate. I love business.
Yeah.
And are we trying to put a number on what I'm trying to achieve, or how I'm trying to figure out how to answer? Because for me, I really enjoy the process. I feel financially free. I feel liberated. I've got the gray hairs and times are tough, and currently I'm being kicked in the balls from every which way. But I wouldn't have it any other way because I really enjoy what I'm doing. I have a successful business that talks to hundreds of clients every single day, all around Australia. I change people's lives and I teach them things that they don't know. And it's to a demographic of people that are not being underserviced. I work with Latin American migrants, and I work with this group of migrants because it reminds me of my parents. They migrated from Italy. They didn't know anything. And like my grandparents, they didn't know anything about real estate here. And they just went and bought something and hope for the best. And they did really well. So I'm here to help this whole swath of people, this whole demographic, to help them create financial independence, doing stuff. I feel fulfilled with my construction company. I love building. I've gotten a taste and a pain for all the things that go wrong. And I really, really enjoy commercial fit outs. I love that type of stuff. I love finance. I love, finance business. It's a very difficult, hard business working with banks, but I really enjoy doing that as well. So for me, it's about growing these different businesses that all pay me passive. It's not really passive because you work the businesses, pay me income. So I really love doing that. And then also I love real estate. So I bought my own home. I'm looking forward to sort of settling into that, doing a massive renovation at some point in time. Because then, as you start to do that, you see what it was and you see what it's going to be. And with every renovation, you get better at your craft. You see the things that you did well and you kick yourself because you go, wow, I should have inset that into the shower instead of having it on the outside. I should have painted it this color and blah, blah, blah. And I really, really enjoy that. To answer your question, I feel financially free. I feel fulfilled. I'm doing all the things that I'm doing, but it still doesn't mean that you're not filled with pain and stress, because all those stresses is what's really driving you. So, my team laugh at me and saying, what kind of punishment are you putting yourself under today?
Well, with punishment and suffering comes learning. And I think life is all about learning. Dom, we're probably very similar in that regard. If you're not challenging the edges and you're not learning something new, you're not growing as a person. And each of the things that you're investing in, from where I sit, are all investments, because they're all producing an income stream. They're all growing in value. They're all saleable assets. So whether it's your business, your construction company, your personal investments, and your relationships even, they all tick all of the same boxes there, mate. So appreciate you sharing that. One thing before we sort of jump into your great book, if you were starting out again, what, if anything, would you invest in differently?
It's hard to say, because that would be for me. It'd be guidance for me specifically, and for me is different for everyone out there. And I always, when I'm speaking, I want to give value to the person listening, and I'm different to you, right?
Sure.
I think that knowing where I am and what I like to do, maybe the first investment I would have bought land content. I would have bought something, R3. I would have bought something that was an undercover development site that I could have sat on and waited.
Yeah.
But even saying that, that's not necessarily the right advice, because putting my lenses back on, I was a young man. I had low disposable income, not a lot of additional savings, and I probably couldn't have afforded it. And that's the reason why I bought the apartment.
Yep. So you put a $5,000 deposit down, which is probably all you had at the time. Well, the good thing is you did something, and you've probably seen this. I certainly have. There's a lot of people who are gunner, and you mentioned before, coulda, woulda, shoulda. You've taken some action, and yes. None of them are ever perfect, but at least you're off the starting gate and you're allowing time, the tenant, and the tax office to really increase your ongoing opportunity as you learn from the experiences you've been through. So no, I think you've covered that pretty well. I want to sort of jump into your book now. The You Won't F It Up. I'm being polite because the subtitle there is Buying Property is Easier Than You Think. To sort of set the tone for that before I sort of dive into the content of the book, having gone through it now, what do you believe are the keys to successful investment and why, and based on what you've seen in the people you've worked with over the years?
I'd say doing what you can when you can. All the really successful people that I talk to were never ready for the moves that they made. I'm talking about developers, architects, industry figureheads. I'm lucky to have a very successful group of peers all around me and watching what they've done. It's a blessing and a curse because you got all these successful people around you and it drives you insane. Comparison is a thief of joy, and you got to try and fight the urge to not compare yourself to everyone around you. But watching all these successful people, watching these different roller coasters, because the path of success isn't linear. It's watching people make moves that they weren't ready for. They made mistakes, but they had the grit to hang in there, follow through, and if you don't quit, you can't fail. Success is inevitable. The outcome is never in doubt for me. It's just a function of time. And if you're sitting in the driver's seat and you can stay in the game long enough, you're going to get to the result that you want to get to. So that's the big reminder that I have every single day for whatever task I'm doing. Building a social media platform, buying an investment, developing real estate, building business. It's the same thing. Doing the little things well every single day. It's about doing 50% every day rather than 90% than 10%. It's staying in the game and just being consistent and doing it over a long period of time. So that's I think the keys to success.
Beautifully said. Are there any quality or character traits that you've seen that separate great investors from the rest? You've mentioned a couple of them. Are there some of those up? Are there any others that you'd like to mention?
It's hard to tell, actually, because everyone kind of gets there in their own way, and that's the dip. Some people will come at investment where they'll look at every single thing, and they will do as well as some people that just follow their gut or follow their nose.
Yeah,
which is infuriating in many ways. It's just the people that get in. It's the ones that get in. I've seen too many really intelligent people sit on the sidelines. The smarter my friends are, the less they tend to do, probably because they're aware of all the mistakes that could be made. They're aware of all the pitfalls, so they don't do anything. I've architects and doctors and lawyers, and I've got a lot of really successful friends academically that did nothing, and they've fallen victim of knowing too much.
Spot on. Beautifully said. The sort of paralysis analysis that comes out of that whole exercise, and knowing too much to the point where you're like a rabbit in the spotlight and won't do anything is worse than someone where ignorance is bliss and they dive in and then build their wings as they jump off the cliff. So there's a fine balance between those two, and it's really important to emphasize that, because it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, that is definitely not a guarantee to success in investment. And in fact, it might be a hamstring. So very well said. I now want to sort of dive full bore into your great book, You Won't F It Up. Just to kick that off, why did you write it? What are the key messages, and who's best suited to read it, Dom?
Can I swear on your podcast? I've done it a few times.
Yeah, no, go for your life, mate.
You Won't Fuck It Up was the title came from an old boss of mine, where he said to me when I was a young bloke in the financial planning firm, property's easy, Dom. You just have to not fuck it up. And what he meant by that is just do the simple things well, and then give the property enough space to grow. Treat it like a Treat it like a plant or a tree. Water it, do what you need to do, maintain it, and just leave it alone. Don't try and pick an apple from the plant that hasn't borne its fruit just yet. Just leave it alone. Don't touch it. So that the book it really is orientated or geared towards unsophisticated investors. It's for people that are looking to get into the market, buy their own home, buy their first property, buy their first, second, maybe third. It's for the new entrants. I found myself having the same conversations every single day with my family, my friends, clients, and sharing the same stories. And I felt the need to get it off my chest. It was terrible timing writing the book. I just had a baby, and my 6-month-old wasn't sleeping and all that kind of stuff. And my fiance wanted to kill me, but it just had to happen because it was something that you needed to get off my chest. And I've written it in a way that it's very simple. It's easy to understand. It's as if you're having a conversation with me at a bar or a coffee shop. Yeah. And I wanted to just distill all the simple learnings that I had learned personally and what I'd learned from all my peers. And it's just a bunch of really easy things that, as if you're going to go and chat to dad or one of your mates, if you're thinking about buying real estate. If it is your own home, here's the things to think about. If it's an investment, here's the things to think about. If this is your type of personality, these are the different types of strategies that you could consider. Here are the pros, here are the cons. If you want to buy an apartment, townhouse, or house, these are the different things that you should think about when buying any of them. Should you buy interstate, regional, cities? I answer all these questions in really simple terms. Yeah. Should you buy north-facing, east-facing, large floor plan house? Like, I try to go into the really simple things that people maybe don't think about when you're an expert, and I try to bridge the gap between expert and novice, because when you're a novice, you know effectively nothing, and when you're an expert, you think you know everything. So, I try to really, really dumb it down and not make it boring, not too many graphs, not too much math. Bring it down to earth, but then also give you all the tips or the tools. So you go to these websites and type in these things to so that you won't fuck it up. Each chapter finishes in, how not to fuck it up. These are the things you should think about.
Yeah, no, and you really hit them on the head. And one of the things I liked in the book was, in the last section, there's a whole heap of ready references you can dive straight into to get really good information that's going to help inform your decision making. So one of the things I also like about the book, Dom, you started with a sort of big picture view of what you believe drives property value. Can you share the sort of 5 key factors that you talk about in the book briefly?
Yeah, so I start with the big picture, because if you get the big picture right, generally speaking, the rest will work itself out, generally, unless you've read and bought a complete lemon of a piece of real estate. But even then, if you hold it for 20 years, you're probably going to be okay. Yeah. It won't be as good as other stuff. There's the opportunity cost, but anyways, the big picture is about understanding the property market, the outlook. So what's happening, out there, what's happening with what direction the property market's moving. And it's about the reason why you want to know what's happening in the market is it determines who has the power when you're buying property. Is it with the seller? Is it with the buyer? And understanding who has the power then determines how you buy real estate. Do you take your time because it's a buyer's market and sellers are really at your whims? Or is it now is it hot and heavy? Is there a frenzy? Do you need to act quickly, identify what you want to buy, maybe pay a little bit over and just get the right investment? So it's about understanding that. It then also teaches you how to do that, by understanding, property prices are basically governed by a few things. One of them is access to capital, so interest rates. The more expensive interest rates are, the less servicing people have. That means they can't afford to buy as much property. So then typically people spend less money. The more cash you give people, the more money they spend. Yeah. Then there's policy. So government policy. If the government incentivizes buying off the plan property and they give you a 50K incentive, then suddenly everyone buys off the plan. So paying attention to government policy will tell you where the market's going to go for those short-term kicks, but also paying attention to government policy will help you get those little advantages that you need when you're just starting. So using those policies will get you into the game a lot quicker.
Yeah.
What I also like to talk about is population and understanding what's happening with population. So I try to look at supply and demand. And I fell into real estate because I thought it was really, really easy. It's about paying attention to supply and demand.
Yeah.
Supply is supply. You can have a look at what's happening in the market, how much available properties for sale. You can read certain reports like Charter Keck will put out a report telling you how much supply is coming into the market. You can have a look at CoreLogic data. You can have a look at homeowners industry Australia. They'll tell you how much real estate is coming onto the market as well. So that's supply kind of covered. And then demand's determined by population, investments in infrastructure, and then employment, economic activity. Similar to your
three eyes.
Eyes. Now, population's simple. The more people that come into an area, they need houses. So property's great. It's not just an investment, it's a home. People need to live somewhere, whether they're renting or buying. So if you pay attention to population growth, and normally in Australia, our birth death is about even. So paying attention to migration, where people are moving to, that'll tell you where you're going to see growth markets. Now, bear in mind, more mature markets don't really have population growth because Double Bay, there's only so many properties in Double Bay. They're not building more properties, so the population doesn't have a chance to really grow. This is more targeted for, growth markets, the periphery, more affordable markets, people getting started. But what you can do with population is pay attention to how population changes as well. So if you're looking at an area that's gentrifying, going from lower incomes to higher incomes, then you can identify markets that are growing within established areas. So an analogy I used is St. Peter's, Surrey Hills, Redfern in Sydney. You can see that the population was changing. It's going from blue-collar workers to white-collar workers. A lot of blue-collar workers will earn a lot of money, but paying attention to how incomes are going from 80,000 to 120,000, that has a direct impact on property prices because people tend to spend between 30 and 50% of their income on rent and their mortgage. So the higher their income, the more money they spend on their property, either upgrading it or on rent. So there's a proportional value between people's income and then how much property is then worth. So pay attention to people. Also paying attention to people tells you about household size. Should I be buying an apartment, a house? Are people wanting to travel into work via car? How many car spots should I have? So people tells you everything about the property that you should be purchasing because that's your target demographic. Investments in infrastructure is about identifying how a market is currently serviced and then how it changes over time. So a mature market has everything it more or less needs. You'll have schools, infrastructure, everything's there. But a mature market then can also change. You may get new roads, a train station, new schools, a new commercial precinct. So paying attention to what infrastructure is coming into an area will tell you how the value for that area will change. So I like to watch how will the value for the area materially change. By putting a new school, people will value that area more. By putting in a new shopping precinct, people value being able to walk to the shops. So watching those investments in infrastructure will give you a very good understanding of how a market will change over a 10-year time horizon because infrastructure takes time to develop and to build. And then the last thing is, economic development or employment. Having a look at what economic opportunities are going to be emerging in a market. If we understand that a new commercial precinct is being developed, that means that there's a whole bunch of jobs that are going to be created and people love to live close to where they work. Not on top of it, but 20 minutes. So identifying where these economic opportunities are going to occur will tell you where we're also going to see increases in property prices. So that's my book distilled in all the big macro stuff.
Love it. Love it. But one of the things I love about what you then go on to talk about in the book is the need to think like a local. Just in brief format, why do we need to think like a local, and how do we do this, Dom?
Well, the thing about property is you can be very high-minded about it all, and you can be a desktop analyst. I talk to CoreLogic, data analysts all the time, and I talk to different economists, and they'll tell you what's happening in Australia. But sitting too high up, you kind of lose perspective. And real estate is it's in the dirt. It's on the ground. It's very local. It's personal. It's how far do I walk to the coffee shop? What's that coffee shop like? And, between 3 and 5, I've got the school traffic come through, and it's a nightmare living here. So thinking like a local brings you back down to earth to understand that in this market, people hate double-story houses. So that'll impact your price. Or having a driveway that's a goat track is a no-no. So thinking like a local is about getting in touch with the investment, getting in touch with the local area, understanding what people actually care about within that specific suburb. And that'll then determine why one property is going to is sitting on the market for 90 days and not selling versus why this one's moving a lot quicker than you expect, because what people demand is different from suburb to suburb, city to city. And also being local will tell you a lot about what street is going to get a premium price versus another street, why it's a dump site. So understanding that stuff, you won't get to know it unless you go and walk the streets, talk to the local population, and chat to the cab driver, chat to the local coffee, to your barista. So thinking like a local is a way to get your feet on the ground and understand why this market functions the way that it does.
Absolutely.
That you won't see on the computer.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's not until, as you say, an area can look great when you're doing it desktop on the laptop. But it's not until you get down and dirty and you understand the perceptions of the area. So an area might look great, but if people traditionally have always said, oh, that area is bad for whatever reason, then that sentiment factor is going to have an influence on the demand and therefore the value of properties is achieved. So absolutely spot on with that. You also talk in the book about, the sort of variety of different strategies that investors need to consider. Can you sort of give us some thoughts on how readers of the book can decide themselves which is the right strategy for them?
There are lots of different strategies in real estate and a lot of different opinions. And it comes down to how much pain you want to undertake as an investor, realistically.
Yeah.
And pain is, for me, in the book, I talk about pain coming from a few factors. Pain is money, how much money you have to spend. That's painful. Spending money is inherently painful.
Yeah.
So the deposits part of it, when you do renovations, that's additional pain. Time is painful. The time that you need to spend on the investment, that's another painful exercise. Experience, how much experience do I need and how much stuff do I need to learn? Learning new things, getting your hands dirty, engaging people, that's all painful stuff. And then also just the risk factor, how many variables are involved in this investment working correctly? If there's 100 different things you need to get right, that's another painful thing. So the more that the investment takes from you, the more painful that investment is. If it requires you to spend 20 hours a week learning a new craft, engaging different subcontractors, supervisors, it's quite a complex funding structure. The more variables that are involved in investment, the harder, the more painful it is. And that's typically because there's more profit to unlock in that investment.
Yeah.
Now, if you notice that, you know what, I don't want to put that much effort into this investment. I love spending time with my kids, and I'm taxed, then you should probably go for something that's a bit more passive, because even a passive investment requires money, it requires time, it requires attention. Nothing's truly passive because it's a tangible asset.
Yeah.
You know, even buying a property, things break, things happen all the time. So nothing's truly passive. So I think you got to have a good hard look at yourself and say, how ambitious am I? How much money do I want to make? How quickly, and then how much pain am I willing to undertake? Because once you jump, the harder things get, you're going to have some sleepless nights, and the more of those compound, the more hairs you start losing, the more issues start popping up.
Yeah, no, extremely well said there, mate. Just before we sort of transition into I'm going to talk a little bit more about Wealthi in a second. But if you're a first-time investor who's time poor on good income and you're wanting to get into property, what and where would you be suggesting are the best property investment opportunities in the short to medium term? And this is not investment advice, by the way. I'm just going to put an underline under that. But given your read of markets and trends, what are your thoughts around where the opportunities are?
Look, I think that time poor professionals have a golden opportunity buying something in Melbourne. I think Melbourne is the most undervalued city in Australia. I can't stress it enough.
Yeah.
You know, it is now technically the largest city in Australia. That's because, you know, they moved some lines and they included some more suburbs. But nonetheless, it was on track to outgrow Sydney by 2030 on the old borders, 2031, I think it was.
Yeah.
And if you have a look at just the big, large macro stuff, Australia is due to receive about 700,000 migrants over the next 2 financial years. Yep. No one really knows, but that's what they're currently budgeting for.
Yep.
And Sydney, Melbourne receive the vast majority of these migrants. So if you simply follow where migrants are going to be moving to, you can dive in and see where people are coming from, you know, subcontinent, you know, Latin America, England, New Zealand, wherever. And you can typically see where people want to go because people like to live around people that are like themselves. You know, when I talk about in the book, you know, when Italians migrate into the country, we went to Carlton, we went to Leichhardt, we went to Five Dock. We wanted to be around people that are like us, speak our language, and hang salami from their kitchens, you know? So same thing happens now. We've got a lot of people coming into the country. You can see where they want to move to. And a lot of Melbourne is, I think, one of the most affordable cities for effectively a grade A city. It's almost at the stage of New York and London. It hasn't quite got the population yet, but that's its trajectory. So you can go and buy an investment there for 600,000, 650,000, rent it out for about 4%. And in some markets, the rental growth is going to continue to go. We've seen a 25% growth in some suburbs around Melbourne.
Yep.
So for me, it's a no-brainer. Go buy something that's off the plan, that's something that's new. Set and forget, claim your depreciation, rental growth is coming, price growth is coming because of migration. This is not financial advice, but yeah, I think that Melbourne's a fantastic market to be buying property in.
Yeah, no, a great justification for that too, mate. I want to talk a little bit more about Wealthi now because we've sort of touched on it, we haven't dived into it. And when I was researching for our chat today, I noticed on your Wealthi website that you provide a zero-cost property brokerage service, but as you and I know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So for the benefit of those listening in, how do you get paid and how much do you get paid so that people understand how that fits?
The way that we get paid it's pretty simple. When you buy real estate, regardless of what you buy, there's always an agent involved. Almost always. I don't know of any private sales these days. So when you go on realestate.com or Domain, you go and buy a house, down the street, LG Hooker, Elders, someone's involved in that fee, they're getting paid 2 to 3% typically, about 2.5%. Now, the way that we operate our business is we go direct to developers, builders, and landowners, and we say, hey, don't pay Elders or CBRE. Don't pay the fee to realestate.com. Don't pay any marketing fees. Don't pay any of those fees. Give that fee to us if we introduce a client to your site. So we have the choice of thousands of different properties around Australia, and we only ever list about 5 different developments.
Yep.
It houses, townhouses, or apartments. And we carefully select the ones that we think suit the types of purchases that come to us. So when one of our purchasers go and buy any of the developments that we buy, that we've listed, then we get paid the fee that would ordinarily go to Elders, or LG Hooker.
Yep. Yep, makes sense.
Yeah. So for us, it's just we sit in the middle and take the fee that would ordinarily go to someone else, and we say we'll take that, and our clients get the service. We're an end-to-end service. We help identify what market's best. We do all of that due diligence on the people that we're buying from. We do a credit score. We track their credit score. Are they paying the subcontractors? Have they got any Phoenix companies? We do a credit score on their builders as well, because you're only as good as the person that's delivering it.
Yeah.
Then we also help match, do the cash flow analysis to see that this is what the investment's going to look like today and into the future. Then at completion, we help then do all the checks. So do building reports, make sure you get all your insurances in place. We then qualify the right property managers that are out in the market and make sure the fees are in line with the market.
Yep.
Make sure you get all your insurances, depreciation schedules, align you with a property finance person, with the right accountant. And then we intermittently catch up with you to make sure the investment's performing as it should. And then once you've got capacity, we look to then purchase the other one.
Right. Yeah, perfect. So how do you overcome and it's more a perception probably than anything, Dom, but the perceived conflict of interest of being paid by the seller while working with the buyer? Do you have any clients that question that? And what's your response when that occurs?
Well, we don't see a conflict of interest because realistically, we are getting paid by the developer, but we don't have to work with that developer.
Yeah.
We can work with any developer we want in Australia, and we're choosing this person because they've met our strict criteria.
Yeah.
We've got a bunch of criteria. We run through it. We do a PIES analysis on the market. Then we do a credit checks and everything else.
Yep.
And if it doesn't meet our high watermark, and we only ever have about 5 or so developments online,
yep.
Then we're not going to sell it. And we don't have to sell it. We're not beholden to anything. We don't take on we don't take on a list. We don't have to sell 5, 10, 20 apartments or houses. We can sell one and move on.
Yeah.
And for our purchasers, they don't have to buy anything. They come in, we don't charge them any tricky fees. We don't try and sell them memberships. They buy a property based on the merits of the investment, on the research. They can fly out to wherever location they want to, and they don't have to work with us. We say, here's all the research, here's the reporting, here's the cash flow. This is what we think.
Yep.
You can choose to buy it. We've done all the work or not. And if you don't, that's completely fine.
Yeah.
So that's where we come back to.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you can't convince or force anyone to buy anything. And that's not the way that we work. Yeah. I would rather walk away from a purchaser that doesn't suit what we're thinking. Hey, if you want to go and develop. If you want to go and do a duplex or a granny flat, you do that. For the people that want to buy something that's passive, that they know that's going to be a high growth market, we're going to collect rent and we're going to get the depreciation, we're a good choice.
Yep.
There are other companies out there that you can talk to. And if you like working with us, then great, buy the investment and we're not going away.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I guess one of the because as I've mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of new builds, given the stamp duty benefits, the depreciation benefits, the cash flow affordability that flows from them. But I've been a bit gun shy in the last couple of years because of the challenges that the construction industry's had. And, gone are the days when you could get a fixed price contract and then you had certainty around the delivery time frame, because if you're borrowing money, that time is money. And then there's the quality issues that go around with the lack of trades and whatnot. How are you overcoming those actual issues on the ground and the perceptions of those issues? Because there's a lot of people now gun shy about the new build exercise as a consequence of the headlines they're hearing about the Porter Davises and everyone else going bust. How have you navigated that fairly difficult landscape, particularly in the current flavour around the new build properties?
Real estate's never easy, There's always an issue. There's always problems in new builds, in old houses. I've got old property, I've got new property. And actually, the older properties are the ones that give me the most issues. And you've always got to engage some kind of tradesperson. There's always an element of risk. We've got the benefit of having done this I've been doing this for more than a decade. So there's a lot of long-standing relationships that I rely upon.
Yep.
Not just to use those people, but then to also find out what's happening in the market. We're property fanatics, and we don't just advise on stuff that we've seen online. We travel and look at everything that we're going to recommend. We touch, we feel it, we kick it. We do credit checks. We then call people that are in the industry to verify, is this person good, bad, ugly? Do they pay their bills? Do they deliver on time? So we do a lot of that due diligence. And we rely upon it. But even then, you can't get everything right. So what we've found is that by being transparent, by being honest, and just managing our clients' expectations and letting them know that this is what we may encounter, that has garnered a lot of respect and a lot of trust. Yeah. So by letting a client know that, hey, these are the problems that we may encounter, and then these are the different quality control things that we've done to mitigate that risk. And then if we encounter these different problems, this is how we're going to manage that risk. That's been very helpful, because lo and behold, the market's cyclical. A lot of things that we've seen 10 or 15 years ago, we're seeing again today. Yeah. So these problems that I'm seeing now, I've seen and encountered them in the past. I've managed these types of problems in the past. Yeah. And there are a number of ways to do that. One of the things I've noticed is that when you're buying property, you don't want to put every single possible dollar into the thing up front. Yeah. So having a cash buffer can alleviate a lot of pain down the road. Yeah. I just recently bought a house and I got $100,000 valuation downfall. What the fuck? I'm buying in a mature market where my neighbors are $3, $5, $10 million and my house is $100K under. Excuse me. So it didn't hurt me, because I know that valuers will come in from wherever. This guy came from Sutherland Shire. Yeah. He's only valued 2 properties. I don't know if you're stuck in traffic or what attitude. So, the point I'm trying to make is that you're going to encounter a lot of issues, but the $100,000 buffer didn't matter to me, because my LVR was about 50%. Yeah. So having cash buffers and having all these different risk factors accounted for before you buy the investment means that it doesn't hurt you so much as when you're prepared for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliantly said. No, brilliantly said. And it is having the rainy day reserves in play to cover the contingencies and planning for the worst and then expecting the best. And then having the right team around you that can do the proper due diligence and give you the confidence that the time, quality, cost issues are going to be covered, despite what they might be hearing in the mainstream media. So very well explained there, mate. It's been a great discussion around that. I now want to sort of shift into what I like to refer to as the bushfire lightning round, where I'm going to give you a blindfold and a cigarette, Dom, and ask you the podcast fast 4 that every podcast asks you. So to kick that off, what's your favourite quote and why?
One of my favorite quotes is reap a thought and then you sow an action. sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, you reap a habit. And then you sow a habit, you reap a character. Sow a character, you reap a destiny. And I like the quote because I don't know who said it, where it's come from, but it's essentially what you think is what you do, and what you do every day becomes a habit. And when you create a habit, that becomes part of your character. And then the character that you are is then the destiny that you manifest. And I love that because it tells you that you have control, some control over the life that you live, that you're not just a mote floating around in the wind, and your thoughts matter. The things that you think about, cultivating this garden of thoughts, it really does matter. Not everything that you think is true. Some things just come in there and they're not, your thoughts aren't your own, which is another thing. So, carefully paying attention to what you're thinking and then paying attention to what you're doing is then the biggest determinant of where you're going to end up in the future. So, yeah, those little things daily, that's what really, really matters, I think.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I've always said that what you think about is what you bring about. So, and in a very well described way, you've broken down how you build a successful character by the thoughts, the actions, the habits that we develop, and the disciplines that come out of that create the opportunity down the track. That's beautifully said. So, switching back to the literary field for a minute, then, Dom. Apart from your great new book, what's the top book that you'd recommend we read and why?
It's a hard one because I want to say 10 different books.
Well, you can give us a couple if you like.
So, if you're one book that I think everybody should read is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Yeah.
That book is about negotiation, but everything's negotiation. It's about communication. It's about the power of words. It's about listening. It's about understanding relationships. It's about power dynamics. It's about, understanding people's worldview. I've read that book a couple of times. I train my team on it. And, negotiation should be a part. It's not an ugly thing. It should be a part of your daily practice, whether you're buying a coffee, a plane ticket, a property, whatever. You should learn to communicate effectively. You should learn to negotiate and to love it, not fear it. That's one. Yeah. Another book that I really like is The Four Agreements.
Yep.
The Four Agreements I can't remember who wrote the book, actually. I bought a copy for everyone, so I can't believe that I don't remember the author's name. But The Four Agreements is another good one. It's effectively really simple practices that you should remember daily, doing your best, no matter what the thing is. Paying attention to the words that you speak, because what you speak is what you bring into fruition.
Yep.
Never assume anything. Assumptions are mother of all fuck ups. So, The Four Agreements is another wonderful book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't harp on. There's lots of good books.
No, that's great. And the couple of you shared there, we get a lot of regular books that people talk about, but you'd mentioned a couple there that haven't been talked about much. And I'm a big fan of the Voss's negotiation stuff. I've spoken about it before. And I think our lives are a negotiation, whether we recognize it or not. Everything is a negotiation. Relationships with our wife, relationships with our kids, relationships with our workmates, relationships. It's all a negotiation at the end of the day. Your ability to influence in a way that produces a win-win outcome for all parties is an art form. There's no question about it. So as you say, a lot of people sort of have this fear of, negotiation, sales, it's a scary event. Well, we're doing it every day, whether we're aware of it or not. So very well said. I want to switch back to the investment sphere for a minute, Dom, and just get you to share what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received.
It's hard because context is everything. You can use a piece of advice and it can be the bullet in the head, or it can be the saving grace. It's kind of like a gun that you can point it out or to yourself. Advice a piece of advice that I really like is, bite off more than you can chew and chew like fuck. Great piece of advice, but it deserves context because, sometimes chew like fuck, you can chip a tooth and you can swallow and you can choke, So I really like the advice because it's just about going out there and doing as much as you can and then just kind of growing and being bigger for it. I've done that, and God, it brings about a lot of pain. So it's just not for everyone. So being aware of your limitations as well, because sometimes you can cause some serious damage.
Yep.
So that's the best and worst piece of advice in one, I'd say.
Yeah, and I beautifully covered, actually. Yeah, so you touched on this when you walked through the quote, but my own belief is that sustainable success lies at the intersection of self-help and wealth, and self is how we think, health are the daily disciplines and the happy habits that we develop that then eventually give us the wealth that we're looking for, depending on how we want to define that. So what's a daily discipline that you employ that's contributed most to your investment success, Tom?
It's hard to tell because, I think a daily discipline for me is getting in and just working, to be honest. I was gonna tell you about cold showers and breathing and
like everyone else is talking about, yeah.
Yeah. Like you do all those different things, but bloody miracle mornings, whatever. I think the thing is just get in and work. I find that a lot of people's anxiety, frustrations, a lot of the issues come from thinking too much and not doing enough. So, if you just get up in the morning and just go for it, you'll find that your soul will be at ease. If you do your best, that's what it is. Actually, if you do your best at the tasks that you're doing in the day, you're going to find a lot of fulfillment regardless of what the task is. Doesn't matter what it is. I've always done this. It doesn't matter if you're flipping burgers, you're selling suits, you're driving a cab, you're running a country. If you build the discipline of doing your best in that moment by being present and here and now and giving what you've got, then that becomes a habit, So I look for that when I'm hiring people. I look for that when I'm working with people. If I'm in a cafe, I love working with people that are doing their best and finding joy in what they're doing. I was a bartender for a while and I fucking had a crack at being a bartender. I used to sell suits and I gave my heart at that. And whatever it is, and that brings joy to you, but it brings joy to the people around you as well. I don't know if you've been served by someone that loves what they do. You can feel it and you want to be around them, and it's life-giving. So by giving yourself to the task and giving all that you've got, it manifests 10 times and it comes back and you feel good. So it becomes like a muscle. So yeah, just going in, working and doing your best, you can't go wrong there. You might do the wrong thing sometimes, but people will feel the intent is there.
100%. And positive energy is infectious, isn't it? And what you give out is what you get back tenfold. No question about that. So beautifully said. Mate, it's been a great conversation today. I feel like we've only just sort of scratched the surface of a whole bunch of stuff that we could talk about in much more detail. So we'll get you back at a later date to dive into that. But if you were to sort of summarize what we've spoken about, what are your key takeaways and must-do actions for aspiring investors that are listening to the show?
Well, this is self-serving. Honestly, if you're looking at real estate, you should go buy this book. I don't care where you buy it from. You can buy it from my website, Dom Nesci. You can go Dimix, you can go anywhere. I think it's a good book. I put my heart and soul into it. And I think it's a good book if you're looking to get into real estate and you're interested or you've just started. There's definitely little bits of gold in there that you'll take away, and you'll be better having read it when you walked away from it, and there'll be stuff in there that you'll remember and you'll tell your friends. I really believe that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with me, having skim read it.
Yeah, no, I have. No, I've gone through this. There's some really good, immediately actionable and usable information that, and it cuts through. As you said, there's a lot of books that are so detailed that people just get buried and actually end up more confused the chaos trying to work out. And it actually scares them off doing anything because it feels so overwhelming. What I love about what you've done in the book is you've broken it down into very easy to digest language, and with focusing on the things that count and pointing them in the direction of areas and sources where they can get the information they need, follow the strategy that feels right to them. So beautifully said. And I think that's a great segue, Dom, I believe, into the challenge that you and I spoke about in the green room before we hit the record button. And you very generously offered Get Invested listeners a special Freedom Fighter challenge. And that is that if you're interested in winning a free copy of Dom's great new book, You Won't F It Up, just email me at bushy@knowhowproperty.com.au. That's bushy@knowhowproperty.com.au. And I want you to answer this really simple question. Why won't you F it up when you invest in property? Dom's given you all the answers to that in our discussion today. So just email me that through. I'll share that with Dom, and the best answer is going to get a free copy of the book. So thanks for that, Dom. Dom, just to bring it to a close, for those that have really resonated with what you've said today, how can they get in touch with you, mate?
Bushy, I'm everywhere. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. You can go to my website, domnesci.com, DOMNESCI. YouTube, I've got my own YouTube channel, my own podcast, which I'll have to get you on if you've got the time. I know you've got 101 things going on.
I'd love to, mate.
Yeah, so that's type in Dom Nesci, you should be able to find me. I'm that dark-haired looking fellow that's talking about property all the time.
Well, Dom, look, it's been a really great conversation, mate. I can't believe I haven't spoken to you earlier, given we've got very similar passions and approaches to the whole property piece. So thanks for your very, very generous time today, and I'm very keen to keep the conversation going.
Thanks, Bushy.
Thanks, Dom. Thanks for tuning in to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, your home for property investment insights and inspiration. And don't leave yet until you've taken the next step towards living by design by getting my award-winning book, Get Invested, absolutely free when you sign up at knowhowproperty.com.au or bushymartin.com.au. And finally, make sure you subscribe to Property Hub to get your weekly dose of Get Invested inspiration, along with every episode of Realty Talk, Australia's leading property show for red-hot property investing news and insights, direct from industry leaders and influencers. Remember to always get invested in your knowledge, and I look forward to seeing you next time.